Hope everybody is doing well, and it's another edition of the online dinner party. Already looking forward to a fun conversation on this particular day. And of course, some folks are probably wondering how things are going here in Durham, North Carolina. And so far, things are lovely. It is definitely a lovely day on the outside, a lovely spring day. And I've had a chance to get outside, got my addition from the produce box, which I sometimes get on Wednesday, and it had some celery, some apples, and some other dishes, including some bagels and other things, including two drinks, some tea, some flavored tea, because definitely I am a typical Southern person. Definitely like that iced tea and that sweet tea, and all in that way. And also it has some chocolate milk and some other things that went on as well. So hope everybody is doing well, and hope everybody is doing good on this particular day. Earlier, one of my guests came on and asked what we were having for appetizers, and so far today it's been a very light day. Haven't even had my lunch as of yet. Gonna have to do something about that. Maybe I'll have dinner. That's that combination of lunch and dinner. Some folks are familiar more with brunch, but sometimes you mix up lunch and dinner and you have what I like to call dinner. But I was thinking about, hey, maybe I should get some cucumber bites. That could be some very delicious appetizers and all along those lines. Or maybe I'll get some meatball appetizers, or maybe I'll get some shrimp appetizers. I do know I have some friends that are big time fans of shrimp, and they love shrimp at different things, even when they are going at events and all in that space. As a matter of fact, I was actually surprised this past weekend, because this past weekend the symphony had a performance, the Durham Symphony, and they had an intermission. I was still hoping that there might be some food in the intermission, but they were probably on a budget. So the intermission was water. That was the intermission that was provided, and all in that space. But folks definitely needed that refreshment, and they were doing that in the afternoon. So I'm sure folks went out and got some real food later on, and all in that space. But that is some of the things that were taking place, and all in that kind of way. And as I was telling Amber LeMay, who I'm going to bring on first, because they are the one of the co-founders of the House of LeMay, which was a drag performance team founded in the early 1990s by both Michael Hayes and Bob Bolliard. And the other regular members of the team is Johnny McLaughlin. And they are over there based in Burlington, Vermont. And one of the things that I noticed is that their acts say that they are from the Hot Dam Trailer Park in Beaver Pond, Vermont. I don't know what it is about drag performances and those lovely beavers, but I'm going to have to find out, because one of the things that I know we have here in North Carolina, in Durham, North Carolina, as a regular activity is the Beaver Pageant. That's right. It's a Beaver Pageant. It is a fundraiser for the Ellaby Creek community, and it is definitely a whole drag type of performances. They've come up as Star Trek beavers. They've come up as Renaissance beavers. They've come up as a number of other folks, and a lot of the folks in the LGBTQIA community are the ones that organize that event. And it is definitely a very much of a family friendly activity, and folks enjoy it, and they have a great deal of fun there. And definitely they have food trucks and a number of other things that go on. I know it's always in the springtime, and if I remember it correctly, it should be coming up in May, and definitely it is around that time, and so it should be coming up pretty soon. I know for a while they were doing it as a virtual activity, but now that things are opening up in society, hopefully this particular year it will be a live performance. And I think it might have been a live one last year. I have to remember whether it was live or not, but for some reason I am thinking that it was, as more and more things have definitely opened up throughout society. And that is definitely an activity that is very popular here in Durham, North Carolina, and a lot of folks enjoy going to that particular activity. So definitely going to bring up Amber. We've got some other guests as well, and we're going to see how they are doing, and all in that kind of space, because we've got all kinds of amazing guests and all kinds of amazing conversations, as we always have on the online dinner party. Also got some other guests that will be joining us as well. How are you doing, Amber? You had asked me what appetizers we were going to have, and that's the only thing I could think of was maybe I should have got some cucumber bites, or maybe I should have got some shrimp or some meatballs or things along those lines. But I have not got either one of them as of yet, but maybe that's what I needed to have had in that space. But
Yeah,
that's
I'm here in the dressing room, and there's nothing. You've got nothing here in the dressing room.
I need to put some stuff in the dressing room. I got to do something
Yes,
about that.
Okay, what are cucumber bites? Tell me, is that just a chopped up cucumber or?
It's like the cucumber bites. You get cucumbers, you mix them up with cherry tomatoes, cream cheese, mayonnaise, and I have seen those as dishes. They're usually little finger foods and all in that space. So it is definitely one of those things that you can get as an appetizer. I've definitely seen them here in Durham, North Carolina, and I've seen them in other places as well. So I'm gonna have to do better with these whole appetizer ideas because I'm sure some of the other guests are going like, "Hey, this is a dinner party. Why am I not having any food? This is just wrong on Mark's part." I used to also do a regular trivia contest as well, and I may bring that back because that was a history trivia that people had to answer questions about sports figures, politicians, historical figures, and a number of other things. And I stopped doing that probably about a year ago, but it's probably time to start bringing that back. But
Bring it
after,
on. Bring it
yeah,
on.
I have to bring it on and
You
everything.
know,
But
I noticed there wasn't any cocktails in the dressing room either. Thank goodness I brought my own.
you brought your own. That's a
I'm
great
always
thing.
prepared. Be prepared.
Always be prepared. Tell me, how did you get involved in the world of podcasting and in the world of having this lovely troupe of yours? And is there something about drag events and beavers? Because, like I said, we got the beaver patch, and I'm going like, is there a connection here that I'm not aware of? Oh, what's going on here?
Well, it all began over 30 years ago. Mike Hayes, my good friend Mike Hayes, and I were a part of a group called Vermont Cares Cabaret Players, and we were raising money as men with other people for the Vermont Cares, which was the AIDS service organization at the time. Which, if you remember, 30 years ago. They needed a lot of help. So, but we wanted to do more. We wanted to perform otherwise. And so we went to a drag show in Burlington. And at the time, Burlington wasn't that there wasn't that much drag going on. Sure, at Halloween there was plenty of messes and dresses, but there wasn't any really drag performances. But then two people started performing regularly, and that was Cherry Tart and Yolanda. And we went to their show, and the crowd really liked them. They liked their material. They just liked seeing drag. And Mike looked over to me and said, "We can do that." He said, "I've got a degree in costume design." And I said, "Oh, I can write shows. I'm funny. I can write jokes." And so we started Amber and Marguerite, the Sisters LeMay. And with our good friend Craig Hilliard as accompanist, who's still with us today, alive and playing, and our good friend Sidney Zook, we started doing shows. And people had so much fun watching us that they said, "Hey, can we be in your show too?" And that's when we created the House of LeMay. Now, the house I created because of the documentary Paris is Burning. If you
Right.
remember that, during the ballroom era of New York, the people were performing late at night, but they weren't accepted from their own family. They were rejected from their own family. So they created their own houses of support. And that's when we created the House of LeMay. And we would do regular shows. Every year we would do our leaf peeping cider sipping review. We're in Vermont, so there's plenty of leaves to peep and cider to sip. And we'd talk about politics and the tourists. And in the spring we do our sap tapping, mud flapping review. I don't know if you realize it, but there's 5 seasons in Vermont. There's winter, spring, summer, and mud. Mud season. So we would make spoofs of spring. We'd also do our Christmas shows. Ho ho ho. There was 3 of us, so we'd go ho ho ho. And then Stocking Stuffers was another one of our Christmas shows that we did. And so we created things. And we didn't just perform and react to the gay community in Burlington, but throughout the entire community. We were asked to appear and perform for such groups as the Edmonds Middle School Drama Department, raising funds for them, who we call the future drag queens of America, and also Ronald McDonald House. We were part of the celebrity servers at their wait-a-thons. The Vermont City Marathon, every year we're at the corner of Church and Cherry Street, directing traffic in drag. We've been doing that for 10, 12 years. And so we're really a part of community. And I don't know if you remember what happened back in March of 2020. Do you recall what happened back then?
No, what happened back then?
Well, on March 16th, Burlington, Vermont, and the world shut down. You know
Yes.
that? Yes,
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 that
yes.
whole thing.
That was March 16th. Now, on March 22nd, I called up my good friend Russell Dreyer down in Queens, New York, and I said, "You know what? I'm getting antsy. I need to do something. Can we do something live?" And he goes, "Yeah, there's Facebook Live." He goes, "Just just get on there and do it. So the first couple of weeks, I did a thing called Ask a Drag Queen. And I would just sit in my living room with poor lighting, my laptop on my lap, and it would be bouncing around, and people would ask me questions. And after a couple of weeks, Russell said, you know what? I think we've got something here. Let's start bringing in guests. And why don't you do something with your lighting and do something with a set? I said, okay, I can do that. And so we started interviewing local people about how they're surviving during the lockdown. We talked to businessmen, business people. We talked to politicians. We talked to entertainers. Just what are they doing? And we got this word spread out there. And Russell, having been living down in New York for 20 years, had had some feelers out for entertainment people. So we started bringing them into the conversation. And here, 147 shows later, we're still doing it every Sunday live. It's called Amber Live now, and we've had over almost 275 guests, 147 shows, and yeah, so I just needed something to do, and it's been really a remarkable journey.
It sounds like a very remarkable journey. A couple of questions were crossing my mind. One, I was wondering if you ever had the pleasure, since when people think of Vermont, they think of Bernie Sanders. If Bernie Sanders has ever come around and participated in the House of LeMay and all in that space. So that was the one thing that was crossing my mind, because I'm going like, Vermont, Bernie Sanders, maybe he
Oh,
could. Yeah.
yeah. The night that Barack Obama was elected president, we went out. Well, we created a group called the League of Drag Queen Voters back when Howard Dean was running for president. Remember Howard Dean?
Yes.
You! Well, we created the League of Drag Queen Voters, and our motto was "Don't blow it, vote." And so the night that Barack got elected, we went down to the big Democratic Party that was held at the local big hotel, and dressed up in all of our finery. And there was Peter Welch, who had just got elected to Congress. We go, Peter, could you have a picture with us? He goes, sure. And Pat Leahy was there, and we'd already had pictures with Senator Pat Leahy. And then I saw Bernie across the room. And Bernie is not the most sociable person, as you may recall. And so I was keeping an eye on him. I go, okay, girls, Bernie's getting ready to leave. Let's go stand by the door. And so we're standing there by the door, and Bernie comes up. I go, excuse me, Senator Sanders, would you pose for a picture with us? And he goes, I will pose for you. And the picture is literally us going like this, and him going, like that. He posed for half a second, and luckily we caught it on there. But Bernie was mayor of Burlington. He was the congressperson from Vermont, and now he's the senator, senior senator from Vermont, and he couldn't be a more supporter of our community.
It sounds like it and everything. Going to bring in some of our other guests as well. But the other question I had to ask you, because some of our folks that have been on the show oftentimes ask about this and everything, is how much of it is do you run into problems with the schools and everything? Because I know that there's been whole conversations where people are upset that folks that are performing in drag are going to the schools, and there's this whole conversation about indoctrination. I don't think anybody's trying to indoctrinate anybody, but I do know that that's the conversation that sometimes takes place. But I'm just wondering, has that something that you have run across? And if so, how have you dealt with it?
No, well, like I said, we've been around for 30 years, so we are part of the community, and not just the gay community, the entire community of Burlington and Vermont. So we're well accepted, and drag queens are well respected and accepted here. I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, Lucy Bella LeMay and I were invited to MC a fundraiser in Fairfax, Vermont. Now, Fairfax, Vermont has a population of under 5,000 and is in the middle of nowhere. And we've had a few friends from Fairfax, and like I said, they invited us to host their fundraiser for a child who needed a service dog, to raise funds for that. And we went there, we got all dressed up, drove like 45 minutes up to Fairfax. We pulled into the parking lot, and there's this huge pickup truck, and all we see is this huge flagpole out the back. The flag, we couldn't see the flag, but I went, oh my gosh, what are we getting into? Well, the wind picked up, and all of a sudden it was a big Bacardi rum flag. And I said, okay, I think we're going to be okay. And then we got in there, we did the show, and they couldn't have been more gracious and appreciative. And during the show, I made a comment. I said, I've do a live stream talk show, and I've talked to drag queens from all over the country. And you know what? If this was happening elsewhere, there would have been Proud Boys in the parking lot threatening you with guns as you walked in here tonight. And I'm so happy to be part of Vermont, whose state motto is freedom and unity, because that's what we're seeing tonight is freedom and unity. And we got a standing ovation. And as we left the building, men, burly Fairfax farmer men came up and said, "Can I hug you?" And it couldn't have been a better feeling or experience of a drag queen in America today.
It sounds like it. Well, I'm going to bring in one of our other guests, and she's been backstage listening. And I know y'all were teasing that you might need intervention, so we're going to bring in Dr. Lauren Pitts and all of those lines, our life coach, and all in that space and everything. So, how are you doing, Dr. Lauren? Sorry, I didn't have any advertisements in the back, so I didn't have any.
You know what, Mark? You're gonna have to do better next time, man. You're gonna have to do better. I'm the shrimp person, so I'm gonna need you to have some shrimp for me next time, please.
And her green room was much better looking than mine. What is that?
How you doing? And Amber does not need an intervention. Let me just say that. No intervention needed.
Well,
No
I want to
intervention.
know, LMFT, Lucky Strike means fine tobacco? I mean,
No,
that's what
you're close. You're
Okay,
close.
okay.
It means licensed marriage and family therapist.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
so depending on the client that I'm seeing, I might need some lucky strikes.
Okay.
What do you need some lucky strikes?
And being in Durham, North Carolina, I don't know where you are, but he's in Durham. Could probably get some Lucky Strikes pretty cheap.
I'm in Texas.
Okay. Well,
Well,
who knows what you can get in Texas?
Yeah, we don't know what you can find in Texas and all of that
Right.
space. Hey, Dr. Pitts, have you had to deal with any family therapy and interventions from those of our friends in the LGBTQIA community? Like I said, Amber's good, but have you had to have some other clients that were in that space and all along those lines? And what are some of the just life lessons and advice that you give to people in general to being authentic and true to yourself?
So the answer to the first part of your question is yes. I mean, I treat everybody. Mental illness and relationship wellness doesn't discriminate. So it's the services that I provide are for everyone. One of the biggest things that I advocate for is exactly what you said, being your authentic self. And if I might add, unapologetically.
Mhm.
You have a right, every human being has a right to be authentically who they are. It's not for me or, in my opinion, anyone else to judge or criticize or just be mean, hateful, and nasty. I tell people often that just because you may disagree with who someone is or how someone else chooses to live their life, how is that any of your business? How do you have a right to judge or criticize them or look down upon them or abuse, neglect, or mistreat them because you disagree with who they are? The flip side of that coin is they may disagree with who you are. Does that give the other person the right to mistreat you? No, it doesn't. I have a portion of my mantra, if you will, that I live by personally and professionally. And it's very simple. Meet everybody in a place of common humanity with an open mind and an open heart. If you can do that, and if you can focus on yourself as an individual and stop making it your business to judge and criticize other people, I feel like we're all works in progress. I have enough work, even though I tell people I'm a human therapist, right? So I have my own work ons. So how dare I point the finger at other people and find reason to judge them or criticize them? That's one of the things that I tell my clients when I'm doing the consultation. There's no judgment or criticism here. I need my clients to be willing to be authentically who they are, because then I can meet them in that place and space and be more effective in my efforts to try to help them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think too often as we don't do that and everything. Now,
Mhm.
I'm sure that even both of you, Amber, and you as well, when you were going into your different jobs and your different fields, there were those folks that were being highly critical and did not want to support you in the various endeavors that you were doing and all in that space. So I just wondered, how do you deal with those critics, and what is your attitude to those critics? Because I know sometimes we can listen too much to other people and not pay attention to our own inner conversations, but sometimes our inner conversation can be just as bad. But Dr. Pitts and Amber, how do you deal with those folks? I'm sure that even when you were creating this entire drag performances that has gone on for decades now, there were probably folks in your family who were going like, "Why are you doing this? This is does not the answer." And all in that space, you don't need to be doing these performances. You're bringing a bad name to our family and all along those lines. So, how would you dealing with that when it happened, or with folks being very supportive?
Well, one thing that we've done is we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars and awareness for various organizations and charities of Vermont. And so that ingratiates us to the general community. So we don't hear much backlash. There was one year, several years ago, we were walking down Church Street, which is the main marketplace here in Burlington. And it was the weekend of the Burlington International Jazz Festival, which we always just go and dress up and parade around and have people buy us drinks and pose for pictures. And at one time, someone yelled something derogatory about us. And people just turned around and said, "Hey, those are the LeMays. Shut up." And we said, "Okay, we're here." That's so they've got our back. And we've had our picture taken with I told you, the senators, the congressmen, the mayors of Burlington, the police chiefs. It's a very supportive. I'm very fortunate to have landed here in Burlington, Vermont. So I can't answer that question the way I think you want answers.
No, that's the open conversation. There's no wrong or right answer. So, Dr. Pitts, your thoughts as well.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Mark and Amber, the clients that I do work with from the community previously and currently, one of the biggest work-ons that we have to address is the rejection that members of the community experience from family. And it's so heart-wrenching because it's like if your family should be your safe haven. Your family should be your safe place and space. And if you're experiencing rejection from the very people that are supposed to be like your unified front, then that positions you to have to go and find that support elsewhere. And that's one of the things, I am very sensitive to those clients that go through rejection because I know what that's like for other reasons. Just being rejected by those people that are supposed to love you and care for you and guide you and protect you. I know what it's like to be condemned and to be looked down upon because of various differences that I bring to the table within my family system and within the community. And what I say again to my clients is, and I work with them diligently to help them reach a place in space where they're totally self-accepting and recognizing that the people in their lives do not have a right to dictate to them who they are or how they live their life, right? So I have a series that I do. It's a 4-part series on strengthening one's sense of self, because if you're navigating life from an inauthentic place, that opens the door for mental illness to come into play. That opens the door for misery and so much unhappiness. And what I say, and I'm going to say it sort of kind of PC, but not. I tell people all the time, you don't have to be a prostitute to the pimp of the people, places, and the people that represent, your judge, your critic. You don't have to succumb to that pressure. It's a choice. And I understand, particularly when that rejection comes from family or those that are closest to you, that it's really, really hard to navigate that space. But my recommendation is sometimes you have to create an extended family. You have to create a community. And as Amber, as you were speaking, I was just taking it. I was like, she's speaking my language. It's about that sense of community that one can form that can be instrumental in helping you to be your authentic self unapologetically, and recognizing that a big part of being able to walk in the fullness of who you are at the core of your being is self-acceptance. So I do a lot of work with my clients around self-acceptance and really helping them to, I call it taking them from the dance floor to the balcony of life, because it's at that elevated perspective that they're able to see themselves more clearly. And when you have a healthier relationship with yourself as an individual, that's instrumental in helping you to have healthier relationships with other people. And sometimes, Mark and Amber, you have to shake your tree of life. Everybody does not deserve intimate access to you, and even family members, sometimes you have to sort of tap them in the forehead with your invisible access denied stamp, because sharing DNA with someone does not give them a license to mistreat you for any reason.
Now,
I
Lauren,
definitely do.
you're in Texas, so I'm sure it's a little different there. But do you see it being different? That there are fewer cases of that, with the acceptance of gay marriage and the visibility of gays elsewhere. Do you see more acceptance?
Absolutely not. Texas is a
Really?
red state. Texas is red. So there's, if I can be totally honest, and of course this is just my perspective. I can't
Mhm.
speak for everyone. Texas is so focused on guns. And it's like all everybody's worried about is their First Amendment. Everybody wants to be able to bear arms, right? But certainly, one of the issues that is very, very, very pervasive here is picking and choosing, if you will, what rights or people are going to be robbed of. For me as an African American, to reside in a state, I'm from Southern New Jersey, born and raised, so I'm from a blue state, but residing in a red state where this country was built on the backs of my ancestors, and to try and have, or not trying to vote to have African American history or African history removed from the textbooks is just egregious to me. To have the right to choose what a woman does with her own body taken from you is egregious to me. But that's the state in which I live. So when it comes to the LGBTQI community, we have, Pride Month is right around the corner, right? We have a huge parade, the whole 9 yards. But as you indicated, where the Proud Boys are concerned, there's always going to be those individuals that navigate life from a very ignorant and limited perspective space. And I don't think that Texas is any different. You have people that are on opposite sides of every argument, and the LGBT community is no different.
Yeah, no doubt. I was going to bring in a person that speaks on diversity, Victoria Peltier, and all in that space. So, Victoria, if you'll share a little bit about your story, because I do know that you're involved in the diversity conversation as well, and you've done a lot of work in the diversity space. And I know that you, just like Dr. Pitts, have a limited time as well. But like I said, it's only going till about 5:30. But you definitely want to continue the conversation and have the great conversation that we're already having. But Victoria, if you'll share a little bit about your activities, because I do know that you're involved in the whole diversity and inclusion space and all along those ways.
Well, happy to be here tonight. And so, yes, I'm heavily involved in the world of diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI for short, but it comes as a result of my own lived experience. So, although Lauren, I hear you, and I will always recognize that I have privilege as a white woman who was born in North America, and I'm originally from Canada. And so that much more fortunate from an LGBT perspective. I came out over 30 years ago as a teenager in high school, in a Catholic high school in a smaller town in Canada. And I'm very lucky that I had an incredibly supportive family. But when I moved into become an executive at a very early age, so I was promoted or recruited in to become a chief operating officer for a large company at age 24. I was the youngest by 2 decades, the only woman, and the only member of the LGBT community. And so that was actually where my journey started in terms of feeling like the only, trying to find a way to advocate for others. So they didn't feel like they were the only, and they could feel like they could bring their whole selves to work. I also have 2 children, one of whom is a trans male. Came out as born a girl, came out as queer at 11 or 12 years old, and only just in the last year decided to start to make the transition.
Wow.
And I'm a very proud Canadian and love the acceptance within that country. But I have been in the US for many years in New York, and now I moved to Florida. So we can have a conversation around what that looks like being here in Miami Beach, where I am. It's far too hot to have Pride in June. So we had ours at the beginning of April. And Amber, there were lots of drag queens who came out. I was not sure how that was going to happen with our amazing governor here and everything that we're doing, but very happy to contribute to the dialogue.
No, I appreciate it. One of the things I was going to ask you, as one that is now living in Florida, I've always been fascinated by that amazing governor, and I know he's thinking about but hasn't committed to running for president and all along those lines. But he's also tackling one of the biggest institutions of all time, because I'm going like, who wants to tackle Mickey Mouse? Apparently DeSantis does, and all in that space. So I'm just wondering how your reaction has been to that, and how the folks that you are involved with have been, because I'm like, well, why are you going to tackle Mickey and Donald? They haven't done anything to you and everything, but apparently he wants to take on that big corporation.
He's fucking goofy. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. I mean, everything that I think he does is about, appealing to a certain base, whether that was, sending the busloads of people from Texas to Florida to go back up north, or taking on, Disney, et cetera. I mean, that one I think was just, that for him is, personal. That one just to me is ridiculous. We're going to open a jail immediately, like beside the, Disney. I don't know. So, I mean, many of us sort of shudder down here with what's happening. Now, Miami and the Miami area is somewhat not insulated, but, much more liberal down here. So, we're fortunate, but for any further north, and it's a pretty scary place to be.
Now, Victoria, wasn't there a rally in Tallahassee? Was it today or yesterday where the drag queens took buses to the state capitol?
Yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah, hundreds of drag queens were on the state steps of the state capitol there in Tallahassee. Protesting what the nonsense that's going on there, from the Don't Say Gay to the banning of books to the banning of drag shows. It's and I'm glad to see them taking action. Drag queens cannot just be in the clubs doing their acts and collecting the tips. They've got to be out there in the community saying, we're here. I hate the word queer, but get used to it. All right. And Harvey Milk had a great example when he was a politician in San Francisco. He said, we will not be accepted until we come out, until your neighbor knows that you're gay, until your boss knows that you're gay, that you are a human being, you're a good person, you happen to be gay. And so that's what I think the drag queens have to get out there and show their faces outside the spotlight.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I've been actually surprised at some of the books that were banned, because I did see recently that in certain parts of the country, might have even been in Florida, the Bernstein Bears were banned. And I'm going like, now what have the Bernstein Bears done to anybody? But there were some other books. I think there was a book about Harriet Tubman that was banned by a certain community in Florida and all along those lines. So there have been some books that I couldn't quite understand what their reasoning was for those that wanted to ban that particular book. I mean, it'd be like banning Curious George. I don't know what a Bernstein Bear can do, and I don't remember reading that book, because that was a book that came up later than my own childhood and all in that space. But it's a bear. What can a bear do?
Well, you know what? There are some magazines that I have about bears that I can see where some people might want those banned, but not the Bernstein Bears.
Well, for those of us in the community, we know what kind of bears you're talking about.
Yeah, Mark does.
I think I could figure that out, and everything might be able to figure that out, even though definitely part of the heterosexual community, but I can definitely figure out, and definitely am one of those people that considers myself a strong ally and all along those lines. So definitely I can have a strong understanding of what y'all are talking about. Now, Dr. Pitts, one of the things, and I'm going to bring in our last guest, and then we'll continue the conversation for about an hour. One of the things I was curious about when we talk about family is, how much is it with the discussions in general, and Victoria, you've got some thoughts about this as well, where family can be a detriment to what is going on. I've talked about folks that are having problems with their family, and sometimes that can be a dividing factor, because I do know that some folks have gone through divorces, and sometimes the children are used as pawns, and sometimes even the siblings can be the reasons for the divorce. That's personally what I think happened to my brother in his second marriage and all in that space. So how do we navigate those kind of relationships where folks are trying to pull at you and manipulate you, or manipulate you as a member of the family unit?
So clinically, we refer to that as triangulation. And that in order to address that properly, you have to be able to put boundaries in place, and they can't be porous boundaries. They have to be firm boundaries, but also understanding that family members, close friends sometimes can be some of the most difficult people to put boundaries in place with. And who better to limit test than family members and friends, right? They're gonna poke the bear. they're gonna keep poking the bear and poking the bear and poking the bear. And at some point in time, there has to be a willingness to draw the line in the sand. Look, it takes courage to be different than the cultural norm or the family system norm. It takes courage, but if you are going to allow yourself to be held hostage or victimized by your family, you'll pretty much allow yourself to be victimized and held hostage by anybody. I tell folks, who better to start with than your family? They can't get rid of, your family. You can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Well, Dr. Pitts, what if they disown me? And I said, well, do you want to live miserable? I mean, look at what this fractured family system is doing to your overall well-being.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But speaking of that disowning concept and everything, I sometimes think, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts. And Victoria, you got some other thoughts around the family and friend aspect. But sometimes I think that we don't live our own dreams. I do know that even in business aspects, I have had situations where friends of mine have had a dream or a ambition or a agenda that they had in their mind, and then they would try to pull you into that agenda. And sometimes you might get lost in it because they are so much big on their agenda that you might even be losing your own agenda. And I've definitely seen that where folks have even tried to get me to join collective organizations when it comes to business umbrellas and things of that space. And I'm going like, well, that sounds like one person's in charge, and I might not have that same direction that you want to go within the umbrella, and who appointed you leader and all in that space. That's just kind of my attitude when I've had that approach given to me twice. But I was just wondering, how can we put those limitations on our friends? Because oftentimes our friends, including some of our business colleagues, will try to manipulate us into falling into their vision and not necessarily our own personal visions.
I've learned to say a simple word: no. No. It's taken me a couple decades, not centuries, decades to learn that. But definitely say, no, that's a great idea. You should do that. Because how many times are you involved? You should. They tell me you should do blah 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 blah. I go, why? Well, because that'd be fun for me. I go, well, then why don't you do it? Oh, well, no, I can't. And I go, well, that's not my priority. I have my own goals and ideas that I want to accomplish. And so if you want that to happen, you need to do it. And then it never happens. But, I just say no, like Nancy Reagan.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense and everything. Sometimes you just gotta say no, even though I'm not sure how much no she said on that whole drug war, because she did have that whole no campaign with the drugs and all that, man. But we're not sure what was going on in that regards. But Dr. Pitts and Victoria, what is your thoughts? I do think that no is a powerful word, and we oftentimes don't use no. And speaking of folks that have had to say no, I'm going to bring in our relationship expert, because we do know that no is a powerful word, and Stephanie has been on it before as well within the no space and the relationship space as well, because I know that Miss Bailey has definitely had some great conversations around relationships and the mistakes that we make in relationships. And one of the things that I know I have been guilty of, and I'm sure some of you might have been guilty of it as well, that I know that Miss Bailey talks about, is the notion of settling in the relationship. Because sometimes we don't even go after what we want to go for within the relationship, and we settle. And I know that I have been definitely guilty of that, and not even going after relationships because I quote unquote didn't feel good enough and all in that space. But Stephanie, what are some of your thoughts? You're coming at us all the way from Denver, so we definitely got the country covered, because we got Miami, Denver, Vermont, and definitely Texas. So we got in North Carolina, so we've got the country covered on this particular conversation.
Well, first, hello, ladies, and thank you, Mark, for having me back. Self-love, honestly, is the key. I mean, when we lack self-love, then we settle because we don't feel like we deserve better. Men and women get into this habit. I, coach women into empowering themselves on love. So that's who I coach. And I find that a lot with women, that when we dive into the self-love aspect, and we really dive into what's holding women back from their own self-love, then we realize that they switch. Once you key into that, you realize that your old patterns didn't work. The people you used to date don't work for you. You want better for yourself. And it's not creating some long, obnoxious list about what somebody looks like. It's really about what you need in a relationship to help it grow.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know one of the things you've talked about, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And I know some of us have been involved in these, but what exactly in your work, because we were talking about Disney earlier, and one of the things that Disney has is roller coasters. And you have talked about the roller coaster relationship. So
Yeah.
what exactly is a roller coaster relationship? And all along those lines, because I know that that is one of the topics that you talk about on your website, missadventures.com. But what is a roller coaster relationship?
So roller coaster relationship is a relationship that goes up and down, all over the place. First it's great, then it's not, then it's great, then it's not. But there's more downs than there are ups. And so I always say, if you're in a relationship where you feel it's a roller coaster ride, it's literally making you sick physically, mentally, emotionally, get off of it. Because so oftentimes we get on these rides because, again, we don't know that we deserve better. And so we think that it's normal to have such, the extremes of ups and downs. No relationship is perfect. However, it should be at least 80% great, not 60 or 40 or 30. It should be at least 80% great, and have that grace for the fact that no relationship is going to be perfect, and that's okay. But having that grace on those moments that it's not perfect, as long as your partner's hearing you and really understanding you, then that's what counts the most. People aren't going to, potentially be okay when you're giving them feedback. Most people are going to be like, nope, I don't want to hear it. But the right partner is going to say, maybe, nope, I don't want to hear it. And then take it and be like, wait, okay, this person means a lot to me. I need to fix my patterns, my habits, whatever is upsetting this person on their own, to come back and say, okay, I've heard you and really listened. And now I'm going to change because I want to, not because I'm asking you to. So it's a lot of give and take, and people are afraid to use their voice. So they end up on these roller coaster rides because they don't know how to express themselves. They fear that if they are honest, that person's not going to be with them anymore. But the reality is, if that person leaves, they weren't your person to begin with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know another thing that a lot of folks get caught up in relationships and in life in general, and I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on this, is folks that have those non-negotiables. That's what they call them and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you talk about is whether relationships have too many rules. So I do know that some folks will have those non-negotiables. If they are a Felix type, then they might not want to be with Oscars. And I do know that there are folks that have various reasons for medical and other reasons to have those rules, and there might be folks that have certain kind of status symbols that they want, and all in that way, and they are very much committed to those kind of rules as well. So, but it seems like one of the things that you asked, Stephanie, is whether relationships have too many rules. So when can a relationship have too many rules, and are non-negotiables actually something that people should be dealing with? Because I do know that there are folks that have had various non-negotiables. They may not want a person that has a certain kind of smile. They may not want a person that has a certain kind of haircut. They might not want gray hair. They may not want certain ages. There's all kinds of things that are out there in that rule book, even though I have seen some amazing relationships that have shattered those rules, because I've seen working relationships of interracial sorts, people that have gone from various countries and still maintain relationships, and even folks that have done different other kinds of relationships that many of society might go like they look like a odd couple and all in that space. But what is your thoughts around rules within relationships?
Well, I talk about non-negotiables all the time with my clients. It's on my website. And really the 5 non-negotiables, because I say there's 5, because if you get more than 5, it's going too far. And they really have nothing to do with the person looks like. So I really have women step away from that long list of he needs to be 6 foot, he needs to be black. I mean, my list, ladies, was ridiculous, to be honest with you, before I found my partner. My partner does not fit anywhere in my list. He's shorter, he's not shorter than me. I'm only 5'2", but he's like 5'9". He's not 6'2". He's not black. I thought I was gonna be with a black man. I had this picture, and the picture was only blocking me from love. And so when I stepped back away from that 20 years ago, and I started to ask myself, what do I really need in a relationship? And one of the things on my list was, I need somebody who believes in God and Christ. They don't have to be religious. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in God and Christ in a spiritual way. And that was very important to me, because trying to date an atheist or, somebody who's a really hard Christian wasn't going to work for me. And then I also wanted to make sure that this person was very family oriented, because that was important to me. So anybody who comes to me, I always ask them, what are your 5 non-negotiables that you really need for the foundations of a successful relationship? And it's not about what the person looks like, because when you get into that look area of what they need to look like, then you're missing the core of the person. So when you start to really evaluate what that means, and I challenge people, because of course, when we meet somebody, we're like, oh, that person's good looking. I mean, they don't have the 5 non-negotiables I talked about, but I'm going to still go for them. And then I challenge, I'm like, okay, so how's that working? Because you created this list, I didn't. So I'm holding you accountable to if this is going to work or not. And anytime people go off that list, their relationships don't work.
Yeah, definitely.
Hey, Mark, real quick, in the instance of time, because I do need to run, can I piggyback on what
Please,
Stephanie?
I was going to go to you. And
I was antsy here. I was like, she's speaking.
You can always piggyback.
So here's the thing. From a clinical perspective, one of the things that I have my clients do is, it goes back to comparably to when we were in chemistry class in high school. I have my clients do a relationship litmus. And what that relationship litmus is, it has 3 categories: your needs, your wants, and your don't wants, right? And what you say when you talk about those 5 non-negotiables, I tell my clients to make each of those categories as exhaustive a list as you possibly can, understanding that how you make sense of this tool is you have to give value to every single solitary line item that you put in each one of those categories. So when you see your needs column, for example, that's your non-negotiables. Your wants column, I tell folks, that's the icing on the cake, but cake is good without icing. That's the bells, the whistles, the frills, the fluff, right? So you can put looks in that category if you want to. The don't wants category is your red flag category. What I'm finding clinically after doing this work all these years is that people fail to recognize that they're the common denominator in every single solitary relationship that they found themselves in. And oftentimes what we all do is we find ourselves in relationships with people that mirror ourselves. So when people hop from relationship to relationship to relationship because they have attachment issues, because they have mommy and daddy issues, what ends up happening is they're in one fractured relationship after the other, after the other, after the other. They don't take the time to heal. They don't take the time to find out who they are authentically at their core. So every new relationship they find themselves in, they're going in as an imposter. So the person has no idea who they're really in a relationship with. The person that's entering the relationship doesn't even know themselves. So how can you really get to know the person? So when you look at each one of those categories and you give it a value, I tell my clients, advise my clients, recommend, resist the temptation to have this distorted thought about, this fantasy of what your ideal man is going to be, or your ideal woman is going to be, or your ideal person is going to be, right? So in that needs category, don't rate everything a 10. What you're going to do is you're going to use that Likert scale, with 1 being not very important to me, 10 being highly important to me, and it's going to be a skewed scale, right? So for example, Stephanie, to your point, Christian and Christ and spirituality is high up on your value list. For me, that's one of them, but it's respect, right? So respect might be a 10, might shock the heck out of people, but for me, fidelity is like a 6 or a 7. I'm not tripping because I'm not validated by your presence. It's nice if you're going to be faithful, but everybody, to each his own, right? The wants category, again, that's not the deal breaking stuff. That's the icing on the cake stuff. That don't wants category is where people get in trouble, because as Stephanie said, they're ignoring the red flags. If you're rating something a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, those are serious things that you need to pay attention to, because they can morph on you. You're rating something a 6, 7, or 8. That's like real serious. You better be paying attention, because now you're in intervention territory. 9 or 10, that's a deal breaker. You better be running through the hills and be like, hey, look, but here's the thing. You're the common denominator in every relationship. So if people do that relationship litmus and then they give themselves permission to be honest with themselves about themselves, and they use that litmus to evaluate every relationship that they've been in, those behavioral patterns and themes are going to emerge for them. And they're going to be like, hey, it's more than just me settling, because as Stephanie said so beautifully, I don't love myself. So you know what? I'm finding myself repeatedly in relationships with people that validate the low opinion that I have of myself. And then I want to make crazy statements like, all men are dogs. All people are gold diggers. All people, they're just using me up. They don't, they can't be trusted. Well, they're a reflection of you.
Mhm.
That's all I wanted to add.
No,
Preach
that makes a lot
on.
of
Yes,
sense.
I love
And
you, Lauren.
I gotta go.
love you, Lauren.
now they got to go, and had a quick question, and
Yes.
always got that the last statement that I get from everybody, so I'm gonna throw that to you in a minute. But I was gonna just ask a quick, short question to them, and I got a quick question for you, but it won't take more than a minute or two. But apparently, commitment is one of the things that I know a lot of people, and I definitely want to get into that conversation with Stephanie and everybody else is with, and definitely Amber and Dr. Pitts were getting on me because apparently I did not have enough commitment to leave appetizers in the room and everything, and all in that space. So that being said, Stephanie, what kind of wines and drinks that you and Victoria need in the room, in the back dressing room, and all of that for the dinner party? Because apparently I did not bring enough food to the dinner party, so I've got to do better in all of those lines. So I just need to know from now to what I needed to bring next time, so we can have this correct dinner party with the right dishes and all.
Well, I'm super into Linner. So when you said Linner, I was like, yes, I love Linner. I love Linner. Yeah, I'm a Linner person.
Yes, so we'll bring some dinner. What about you, Victoria? What I need to bring next time that I invite y'all, so that we can have the right dinner?
Well, cheese and charcuterie goes a long way, almost anywhere, and some great green olives. So all of that together with, I don't know what, Amber, you've got in your cup there. Mine is sadly only water, but red wine.
But that's what I was going to ask. I was going to ask what we needed because we got some water. So I need to find out what liqueur I need to bring to the next party as well. So what do we need to have drink-wise? So we've got some liquor that apparently Amber has got and everything. The rest of us are having water. I did have some sweet tea, as I mentioned earlier. So Stephanie, what do I need to have for the liquor? Because outside of the water, I'm sure they need to have
I would normally say a dirty martini, but I haven't been able to drink for a month. Every single time I take a sip of alcohol, I get nauseous.
Ooh.
So yeah, fun stuff. So I've been watering it up a ton. So yeah, but normally I would say a dirty martini or an espresso martini. But yeah, water for me.
Well, mine is potato water, otherwise known as vodka.
So is vodka, exactly. And what I need to bring for you, Dr. Pitts, and as you know from being on the show
frozen
before,
margaritas, a margarita swirl works for me. Frozen margarita swirl.
Nice.
And if the appetizers are all right, we can have some cucumber dishes, some crab cakes, and different other things.
Crab cakes and shrimp for me, please.
Crab cakes and shrimp for you. Stephanie, what do we need for you?
Gluten-free crab cakes would be great.
And Victoria, what are we bringing for you next time?
Well, I said charcuterie, and cheese and charcuterie is my fave.
You'll go to good. Well, we're going to continue the conversation and all that. But I do know that Victoria has to leave and Lauren has to leave. But one of the things I was going to ask Lauren, did I get all my guests to do, and she knows from the last time she was on, when she had the pleasure of being on with the amazing Kreskin, because she actually had that conversation as well, and everything is any thoughts that you have in terms of how folks can reach you, and also any messages you want to give to our global community in the message of positivity and hope, because that is one of the things that I have as one of my personal missions, is trying to spread positivity and hope during this troubled times that we've been in for the last several years and all of that space. So any thoughts and how folks can reach you?
Embrace your difference. Your difference is what sets you apart from the world. You were uniquely created to be you. You don't have to compare yourself to other people. You don't have to try and be anybody else other than authentically who you are, and embrace who you are at the core of your soul unapologetically. You are amazing and wonderful and fabulous and great, being authentically who you are. You deserve to be authentically who you are unapologetically, and never allow anybody to rob you of your power to be you. And as far as how you can reach me, my name is my handle. My website is drlaurendpitts.com. I'm Dr. Lauren D. Pitts on all of the social media platforms. The only one that I'm not on is Twitter. I have a YouTube channel. I have a podcast on Saturdays that I do on sports and mental health and relationships. That's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook Live, YouTube. It's everywhere. I'm easy to find. I tell folks, just Google my name, I'll come up.
No, quick question. I know you got to leave in 5 minutes. You got that client and everything, and I don't know if you can answer it quickly. You might have to get it the next time. What's
Sure.
going on with our athletes and mental health? Because it seems like every time I turn around, they are finding different ways to engage their mental health. I was actually a big fan of what Amber did in the sense of being authentically herself and everything. But I've also seen some athletes that are being a little bit more physically active in the sense of lashing out at some of their competitors that I have seen in the past. And I don't know whether that's just the way that society is or your thoughts on that.
It's a combination of things, Mark, and it's, I'll give the brief answer and come back and answer it, the long-winded version at another time. But what people fail to realize is that athletes are human beings. They're human beings that have trauma. They're human beings that have fractured attachment. They're human beings that have hurts and pains and disappointments and fears, just like every other human being on the face of the planet. The only difference is they're athletes, so they're in the spotlight. All of their business is on Front Street for everybody to see and dissect and analyze and to belittle, degrade, and demean them about. So when you look at mental health systemically, when you look at mental health holistically within the arena of their athletic performance, you have to look at them more like an octopus and look at all of the different domains that life is perhaps throwing them curveballs, and their primary focus is on being a stellar athlete. Their primary focus is on being an elite athlete without the appropriate attention being paid to all of the other contributing factors that are perhaps eroding their sense of self and ultimately eroding their mental health.
Yeah. I can definitely understand that. Glad that you were able to appear and all in that space, and hopefully you will make. Well, you made 2 appearances, so hopefully have you back. I love having guests come back multiple times and all in that space, as you know, and as Stephanie knows as well. So definitely hope that you will have a chance to come back and share more of your great wisdom, because I always enjoy your conversation and what you bring to the table. So definitely hope that you will make a return trip.
Yes,
Thank
Lauren,
you for
love
having
you.
me, everyone. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's been an honor to share the platform. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You were saying, hey, Victoria, one of the things I was curious about, and you may be able to speak to it, kind of like Dr. Pitts was doing and everything, but how do you you 3 ladies feel about people, whether they be athletes or entertainers, that use their platform to talk about things like diversity and things along those lines? Because we've seen that happen quite a bit, where athletes have been stepping out. Like I said, I referenced Amber earlier. There have been others that have stepped out and used their platform. Even we heard Amber saying that she has used her platform several times to talk about issues. But how is your thoughts about using the platforms that you are granted, whether you are an athlete or a entertainer, to talk about social justice issues?
I think it's critically important. I mean, there's a saying, actually it comes from Ginny Rometty, and I worked for IBM for a number of years. Ginny was our CEO, and she said, "You cannot be what you cannot see." And so when we talked about diversity, and I think that's critically important, is to use the platforms we have. I often tell people, like, our voice is our power. And so for me, I know when I first joined IBM, actually, I was asked to be one of IBM's out executives, of which there were only 30 worldwide. And what I recognized is that there were people who needed to see others like them. And by the way, I identify as queer. So, and today's, the Lesbian Day of Visibility. I identified for a few years as a lesbian, but I was married to a woman for 11 years. To my husband now, we will celebrate 10 years together at the end of this year. And so, particularly, not falling on either end of the spectrum and recognizing fluidity was important also. And so I use that as the platform for others to engage, to let them know, that it's, they could come out and they were going to be supported. Having a trans child as well, and talking about what that's been like in supporting my child as a parent. And so I think it's critically important, but I do understand the challenge that some people in business and sports or others, why they're fearful of it. And we've certainly seen the ramification for some over the last number of years who've made that choice. But I think if we want to make progress, we want to see the needle advance, not just for LGBT, whether it's, I as you said, Mark, I do a ton of work from a DE&I perspective. A lot of that's around the advancement of women and gaining gender parity, but also taking a look at people of color. We have so far to go. Fortune 500 companies, only 53 women and only 6 Black CEOs. Like that is clearly not representative of our population. So we need to be doing, much better. So I would say to that question, like I would encourage those who have a platform and even those who don't. We're all leaders, whether we have hierarchy or a title behind us or not, to advocate and speak up.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I was just wondering to both of you, Victoria and Amber, what your thoughts were around the whole controversy with the beer commercial and what was going on with Dylan Mulvaney and all in that space, because we definitely saw a lot of pushback when a certain major corporation decided to put a image of a trans on their beer campaign and all in that space. And there's been a lot of pushback from the conservatives. But I'm just wondering y'all's thoughts on that.
Well, about that, who cares? Budweiser chose to do that. Good for them. If you don't like their beer, and many people don't, and the people who are saying, "Oh, I'll never drink Bud again," they weren't drinking Bud in the first place. All right. But getting back to what Victoria was saying, using your voice, I always say use what you got. And I'm fortunate to have some confidence and the ability to speak out on things and a platform to do it. So I'm using what I got. Now, as Bob Bolliard, the man, I wouldn't have the impact on what I say. But as Amber LeMay, the drag queen, people are paying attention to me. At first, they might just say, "Oh, what's that freak saying?" But once they listen to me, they might agree or just start thinking about what they're saying, what I'm saying. So I just use what you got. And, I want celebrities. I want to know how they feel. I want to know what their opinion on things. Because I tell you, there's some who I hear what their opinion is. I don't listen to them. I don't go to their movies. I don't want to give them any money. So I do value that. So I want them to speak out. Show us who you are. And that might be different from other people think.
Yeah.
Well, this
What about
brings
your
this
thoughts?
whole. Well, there's a lot of companies who are debating, what to do in terms of how to speak out. How does it align to sort of the organizational purpose and values, and give a lot of thought to the communities that they are working, living, and hiring employees from, and are they representative? And so I love the fact that Budweiser did this. When I'm disappointed at people like Kid Rock and others who've chosen to speak out dramatically. I don't know if you saw his video of like shooting up cases of Bud Light. What disappointed me most, and I know it was today or yesterday or last night I heard it, but the two marketing executives for Bud Light have currently been suspended. And that to me, I think is horrific. So, I mean, that speaks volumes for, Anheuser-Busch, the parent to the Budweiser family to, suspend them for, doing something that's incredibly progressive. And also, by the way, trying to capture a whole new audience that's not, to your point, Amber, it's not drinking their beer today. So if you want to attract, a different community, I was happy to see that Budweiser's, being progressive, but so dismayed by the reaction response and now subsequently the follow-up and suspension of these two leaders.
I saw a funny meme that said, "Okay, let's appeal to Kid Rock's fans," and they put Kyle Rittenhouse on a can of Bud Light. That would turn a lot of people off too, I think. But it's just, so what? They did that. There's a lot of things that if they want to reach out, that was fine. They didn't mass produce it. It's not like you're going to the store and find those cans with her picture on it. That was just a promotional so she could promote the beer. And so just, I'm not going to drink Bud Light. Well, okay, fine.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Definitely understand that and everything. You mentioned something, Victoria, and I'm going to piggyback to a conversation or a question I got for Stephanie, but you did mention the pay disparity, and I do agree that it makes no sense how much women are paid compared to men, and it's been that way for decades. But then again, I also don't understand how the base unemployment rate or the base minimum wage is as low as it is, because I think that base one is like 2 something or something along those lines. I'm not talking about the federal minimum wage, but the ones that restaurant workers get paid and all in that space, and it's something that is ridiculously low and all in that space. But I'd love to hear your thoughts, Victoria, around how we can get rid of that and find more parity within the pay system, because I think it's like 70 cents to the dollar or something like that. It might even be less than that, but it is definitely very disparate when I have heard those figures.
Yeah, so I was speaking around just the diversity around the population itself. Gender pay equity is a whole other thing. I mean, the World Economic Forum did in their report that came out late last year, showed that in North America, we are 60 years away from achieving pay equity parity in North America. Now, better than some countries around the world where we're talking in the hundreds, but and it's more than 70 cents now, which is, so there's been some progress. But we need to do, I use a phrase a lot where I talk about strategic intentionality. And that regarding the entire, DE&I program, it's more holistic than this myopic focus on bringing diverse talent in the front and then not doing anything in the middle. And they're running out the back door as quickly as we might, bring in diverse talent. So there's, intentionality around how we pay. And this is why you see certain states like New York and others mandating that the, pay range must be listed within the role profiles as they go out publicly, or companies who need to intentionally go through and look at gender and other measures. Now, what I will say is it's self-ID for many different types of diversity. And we're not just talking, and it's not just the traditional diversity between gender and race and sexuality. I mean, and then there's intersectionality, but we rely a lot on self-ID. But to the extent that we can, and in the US, we can at least look at persons of color and gender, we need to then look at their tenure and then map it to current market conditions and comparisons for their white male colleagues. And so that's something I would encourage all organizations to do in terms of being incredibly intentional around creating parity.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I saw on your profile and on your list and everything, and I was going like, I have no idea what that word means and everything. Is probably a word that I should know and everything. But since I don't know, I'm going to ask it. What is a multi-potentialite? Because I'm going like, that looks like a new word and I don't know what that word means. So if you don't know, ask.
Okay, well, Amber doesn't appear to know what it is either, so that's okay. I mean, that is a person who has a multitude of diverse interests, as I do. So I am a multi-potentialite.
Oh, okay, I like that. I'm thinking Stephanie might be as well, and I'm thinking that I might fall in that category as well. Could definitely have multiple interests and all in that space. Now, one of the things that I know that happens even in the relationship space, and we did learn, of course, about your relationship and its success. Some of the others have talked about their success with their relationships and all in that space. But sometimes within the relationships, finance becomes a big conversation, and sometimes it is almost a breaking point, because I do know that some people are wanting people of a like-minded financial background, but I'm perfectly of the opinion that there are some blue-collar workers that make more money than even some of the doctors and lawyers, but they sometimes get ignored and all in that space because they don't quite fall into the bucket of people and all in that list. So I just wanted your thoughts around that from a relationship standpoint, because I do know that there are folks that are very materialistic and they want those materialistic things. And if that's what your thing is, that's perfectly fine. But I do think that there are folks that sometimes limit themselves by those materialistic aspirations. But I was just wondering your thoughts on if that is one of those misadventures.
Honestly, I feel like when it comes to finance and relationships, it's something that two people need to discuss and figure out what page they're on. Really what you're talking about is, if a blue collar worker makes more money than a doctor, well, then that's a whole different story. That means that person is wanting a doctor because of the label, the title of their job, more so than the money aspect, right? I mean, sometimes we're drawn to like, what do you do? I mean, that's one of the questions people ask right away. And, again, I would say refrain from asking that question first, figure out the core of the person, because then again, we're labeling and we're making it harder for us to find love. And yes, there's going to be criteria. I mean, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you probably want a guy that, has a car, unless he lives in New York City, but like has a car, at least has a place of his own, whether he owns or rents, right? I mean, those are some criteria most people are looking for depending on their age. If they're younger, those aren't the most, important criteria. So it just depends on your age group and what you're really looking for. I don't really care what somebody drives because I don't really know cars. So that's not a thing for me. My partner, he's into cars. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's literally like foreign language for me. I drive a Kia Soul. I don't care about cars. You know what I mean? Like, so, again, you have to find that person that is similar on the same page or respects your opinions. I mean, like
Right.
any relationship, it's really about, do you respect that person's opinion? You know, are you okay if their opinions aren't the same as yours? That's huge. You know, so some people are just so set on, I'm this way and I will not respect anybody if they're that way. I don't know. I feel like there's always got to be give and take.
No, that
So,
makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
Stephanie, a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, I was at a show and a drag queen was on stage doing her bit. And she goes, "How many here tonight are 40 and single?" And a lot of people raised their hands. And she said, "Settle. Just settle." Now, I am over 40 and I've never settled. I've never been in a relationship. I'm not in one now, of course. But so, how do you talk to people that it's okay to be single and not to settle?
Own your self-love. I mean, the second you own your self-love, you can determine what's right for you. Society is what makes us feel that we need to be in a relationship or get married at a certain time or have children. I'm not married. I've never been married. I don't have children. I have my partner's kids who are my stepsons at this point. That's what they call me. I've been in their lives for almost 4 years and we all live together. So, you know, at the end of the day, you create your own happiness and what that looks like for you. You know, there's a difference between I want to be single and I'm happy being single versus I want to be single because there aren't any good men out there or women out there. There's a difference, right? There's a huge
Right.
difference between hiding behind the rock and being on top of the rock and being like, I'm great at where I'm at. And that's where each person has to determine what that is for them.
No, and then Stephanie, along those same lines, I do know that there is a large population, some that are in the LGBTQI community, but some that are also in the heterosexual community that are in quote unquote non-traditional relationships. I have at least one or two friends that are in that whole multiple partner kind of relationships, and they are very happy in that relationship, and all the partners are that are involved are working together, and they seem to get along in that space because they set the rules and they are living by the rules according to the way that they want. I've not heard any complaints from the folks that I know in that space, and there are definitely a number of folks that are in various swinger kind of communities because it's a bigger population that people like to recognize it as, and all in that space. But I don't know that because it's all those negative stereotypes about it, that it gets a lot of pushback and all in that space. So do you need to be comfortable if you are in those kind of relationships, or do you just kind of like keep those relationships secret? Because I do know some folks that are in those relationships that choose to keep them quiet, and there are others that are more open about it.
That sounds like too much work for me. Oh well, oh yeah, that's but more power to them. If it works for
Yeah,
them, more power to
that's how I
them,
see
not
it. If it
me.
works for them, that's great. I also feel like if you're happy and you're in something, you know, but then you're feeling embarrassed or, you know, that you have to hide it, you have to ask yourself why. You know, I don't feel like I look at it like everybody, whoever wants to be happy in whatever way, I'm okay with it because I feel that love rules us over hate. And if we focus on love, then the hate and the fear and all that other crap goes away. Because, you know, if you're focusing on hate, it negates love, right? You can't focus on love and then still have hate. That's not how it works.
No,
So,
but along those same lines, don't you find that some people are caught up in imagery? Because I do know some people that are not that open about the relationship they are in because the person might not be the quote unquote stereotype of what they are perceived as their better partner. Because I do know some people that the person is, let's say, a little bit more on the chubby side, or maybe they're a little bit more on the handicap side. They may be happy in a relationship when they're in the relationship, but then they will not necessarily make those relationships public. And I have seen that from a number of folks, but I'm just wondering, how do you deal with folks when they're in those kind of spaces? Because I've seen folks that, you know, they're like, won't necessarily bring their significant other out because they're afraid of the quote unquote ridicule that they might get because the person is heavier or is handicapped or whatever the limitations may be.
That's the
again, that's
lowest of the down
self-love.
low. That's the lowest of the down low.
Yeah. And here's the thing, it's lacking self-love, you know.
Yeah.
When you love yourself enough, you're not going to care what other people think. You know, when you're so worried about what everybody thinks, well, guess what? Your life isn't yours. It's based on everybody else. And who wants to live a life where you have to be like, okay, what do my friends think? I don't care what my friends think. If I love somebody, I love them. and I'm bringing them around. And if my friends, which I don't have any friends in my life because I had to, as I call it, sweeping out, like you clear out the clutter when it comes to spring, summer, fall, right? Sometimes we have to do that with our friends. If your friends aren't supportive enough, and your friend should be somebody you can also vent to, right? And not then turn around and be like, wait, you said you were mad at him. It's like, and I'm great today. I want to be able to vent because I need to get it out. And I don't necessarily want to vent to him every single time I'm upset about something. That's when you have to have your good people around you that you can do that and feel safe. It's the same thing when it comes to relationship. Your friends and family, the people that love you should love whoever you love that's making you happy. And if you're too insecure to show that person, then you don't deserve the person you're with, frankly, is how I feel.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But what do you think about those people that, and I did see what you said, Victoria, so I'm going to wrap up with everybody very shortly, but what do you say about those folks that are concerned about over communicating some of their feelings? Because I do think that some people are too quick to talk about their relationships. You just kind of alluded to it. And some things you might want to keep to yourself. And there are some things that you definitely want to share with your friends and families. But I do think that sometimes people over communicate what's going on in their relationships. And that can be problematic because some of that can then turn around and bite you in the backside because they may use it as a weapon and even sometimes undermine the relationship.
So
And
how
again,
how many of us have Facebook friends that we've already seen they've had 3 loves of their life this year? That's and you go, really? You just had the love of your life. Are you reincarnated? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, to me, that's just people who, again, need that validation, right? It's when you're overly posting or you're saying, I don't, on my social media, I don't say that I'm in a relationship. I never have changed that because in my opinion, that doesn't matter. It's like, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, I'm in a relationship. Now I'm single. Now I'm in a relationship. No, like that's just too much. It's like, I don't need people's validation. And I also don't need people, reaching out and be like, oh my gosh, you broke up with that person. I don't need all that. So I really feel like, again, it's that self-love piece in all of us that when we gain that self-love, and it's not looking at yourself in the mirror or what you drive or the home you live in, the car you drive, all that stuff. That's not self-love. Self-love is that inner deep work that we have to do to say, my past is no longer my future, my present, or anything. It doesn't define me, and really understanding what that means. And a lot of times is getting deep into, what the relationships we have with our parents, the relationships with our friends, our coworkers, the people we keep in our circle that, can weigh us down and we don't even realize it. All of that makes a huge difference. And then once we gain that self-love tool, the world is like more clear. It's like all of a sudden you don't need glasses, you can see things more clearly and you're like, wow, like I don't need these people in my life because they actually are bringing me down.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I was curious, and this is the last question about the relationship. Do people still ask? Because I do know some friends that are very much big on their astrological signs. I know that I'm definitely a Cancer, and sometimes I feel like a typical Cancer. So other times I don't. But do they still ask that question in relationships, or is that so passe that it's so 70s it's not funny?
Some people ask it, but I always say look beyond. It's like I'm a Leo, I'm a Cancer Leo. According to the signs on the 22nd at 10 a.m., Cancers are no longer Leos come out. I'm 948. When I was younger, I was like definitely, I guess, more of a Cancer. And then now people say I'm more of a Leo. I'm very headstrong. I'm not super emotional, that type of thing. However, if I was living by my astrological sign, I don't know if I'd actually be with my partner today, right? Like, I feel like people get so stuck on that. And again, that's a tool to kind of like keep you from love. It's like, oh, if I'm not with an Aries or Pisces or whatever it is, it's like that. The core of a person is the core of a person. Yeah, there's the sunrise and all that type of stuff, but you can have 2 people on the exact same birthday and they're completely different people.
No, absolutely.
I'm on the cusp of Aquarius and Pisces.
Ooh.
And so someone did my chart once and then, wow, you're interesting. I have the best and worst of both. So yeah.
Sounds like it, everything.
Victoria, what are you? What's your sign?
Yeah.
I'm a Taurus, and I don't. I mean, I know, bullheaded, loyal, which does actually describe me, but I couldn't tell you about the other signs and whether they work well together or not. I've never otherwise followed it.
I hear you. Like I said, get ready to wrap up, but I definitely want to get to Victoria first and get ready to wrap up with everybody since it's almost at that 1:30 mark and all in that space. But Victoria, if you can share folks how they can reach you and any messages of positivity and hope that you would like to share and any thoughts that you have. And of course, I'll go round robin. I'm actually going to have to throw on because I've been enjoying this dinner party in my sneakers, in my socks. So not even the sneakers. I got to throw on my sneakers because I've got to go to work after we're done with the dinner party and all in that space. But that being said, if you'll do that, I'll go off screen, but I'll start with you, Victoria, and we'll go round robin. So Victoria, Amber, and then Stephanie, but definitely start with you, Victoria.
Great. So I'll start with the, positive message first. So we talked a little bit about this today around sort of expectations, et cetera. I often tell people you are the CEO of Brand You. And so you decide how far and wide you want to go. You're going to define what success looks like for you, and don't feel the pressure put on by other people. That comes the same when it around your own personal brand and how you build that. What's the legacy and impact you want to lead? And my favorite quote is "Everything you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear" by George Adair. And so for growth, we need to face the challenge and lean into the things that make us really uncomfortable. And time again, and it will become much more natural, maybe not innate, but much more natural. And where can people find me? So I have worked very hard on my brand for many, many years. So if you Google me, I'm the first many pages that come up. But I do have a personal website, which is victoria-peltier.com. I do a ton of writing. I've written some books, podcasts, and media appearances are there. And I am a professional speaker. So you can find me there and then connect out to whatever your other favorite social media platform is from my site.
Very good. Well, I loved your favorite quote there, and I think mine is, "If not now, when?" I think it was attributed to Robert F. Kennedy, but I think it's been said by many people before him. But I think, especially in these days and this day and time, if not now, when are we going to change? When are we going to do something? When are we going to stand up? So that's what I think it needs to be happening now. I do my show Amber Live every Sunday night, 8 o'clock Eastern. You can check it out on amberlive.tv. If you want to Google me, Google Drag Queen Vermont, and I'm going to show up. I'm going to be right there at the top. But I want to thank Mark so much for having me here tonight. I've really enjoyed talking to all of you. Thank you very much. So Stephanie, take it away.
Hi. I would say my biggest positive that I can leave you with is love. When you focus on love and loving yourself, that's the key. That's really the key to happiness. You have to gain that happiness within yourself first, not try to seek it throughout others. And once you do, you will be truly happy. And whether you want to be in a relationship or whether you want to be single like Amber, you're going to find that happiness, that true happiness inside of you.
Wait, I didn't say I want to choose to be single. I said I'm happy to be single.
Oh, I thought you were choosing it.
I'm happy being single, but if Mark came along, I might.
But yes, whether you want to be single or you're just happily single, right? That's the key. And you can find me on my website, miss-adventures.com. I'm on Instagram under miss_adventures with an S_coach. Stephanie Bailey is on my Facebook as well as my LinkedIn. And then also I have a Miss Adventures page. I'm also a published author. I've been in 3 books that have made #1 bestseller. Those are also on my website as well. And yeah, that's what
And Amber, hate to disappoint you, but I've been trying to track down both Holly Berry and Layla Roshan, and none of them are available at the moment, but I'm still actively looking and all in that space. I know they're out there. Stephanie's going to help me find them. I don't know how she's going to help me find them. She's in Denver. It's closer to California. There's all of that space. I'm actually trying to figure out those folks. I know Dad had a thing for Pam Grier back in the day and all in that space, but those are some that I've been trying to track down, or at least a lookalike to them and all in that space. So like I said, trying to find those folks in that kind of space, but who knows, maybe they're out there. Stephanie, I'm sure you've got some contacts from Denver to LA. It's only like a hop, skip, and a jump away and all in that space. So I'm sure that you can make that happen. Or maybe Victoria's got some ties. She's over there in Canada and has got all kinds of amazing abilities and all in that space. So I'll have to see whether they can make that happen. I know that I've had some folks that have said, hey, maybe you need to find one of those, because I don't have any children, have my 2 nephews years, and they're like, maybe you need to find a younger person. And I was courting and flirting with somebody that was in that 40 space, but I'm going like, that didn't quite work out, but who knows? It might resurface in another way or along those lines. So we're going to see if that happens or it doesn't happen, or maybe there's somebody else in the 40, 50 set as I'm about to hit the big 61 and all in that space. Or maybe I'll just do the whole adoption thing, because adoption is a wonderful thing. And there are a lot of kids that need adopting and or fostering that are out there as well. So might have to look into those possibilities also, but we'll have to see how that goes. Victoria, you mentioned being a business coach. One of the shows that we have on Thursday is Barbara H. Smith, who is a celebrity trainer and a coach herself and a business speaker and all in that. And I know that she oftentimes is surprised at the introductions and all along those lines that people give her, because she sometimes finds that they are very staid. So she sometimes gets folks to tell a unique story to be an icebreaker, so it's not just the people reading the bio. So I was just wondering, is there a way that you get folks to introduce you when you're on that is different from other folks as we're getting ready to walk out the door? Because I know she does this whole thing about being an engineer at a certain age, a race car driver at a certain age, and all of this in just very young ages, and you learn how those stories maneuvered and happened and all in that way.
Well, that's part of my story. Become COO at age 24. To eventually become, CEO at 41. But that's part of it. But for me, it's you need to differentiate yourself. I was talking about personal brand, and a big part of that is not just the eminence or what you're known for, but what makes you different, what you're passionate about. And quite honestly, as you curate the narrative, what do you want to be known for? What's the legacy you want to lead? And so that's how I choose to be introduced when I go and stand on stages, or I'm fortunate to be recognized for some of the work that I do.
Sounds good. Stephanie, how do you choose to be introduced when you are on the stage? Well, to go with that as our outgoing conversation and everything. So when you are in those environments and everything, because there are lots of speakers, and I know you're a speaker as well. So what is the unique way that you choose for folks to introduce you?
Just empowering women on their love journey. That's what I do. Everything I do is, surrounded by that. That's my number one goal, because I just feel like women don't get enough of that, right? It's like I feel like we don't compliment each other enough. I mean, I'm big on that. If I see a woman, I'm like, okay, I want to compliment her, because I just feel like, why not? I mean, we're not competitions of each other. If you really think about it, we're here to uplift each other. And the more we do, the stronger we become. I mean, you see it in every single time. If you go out to have brunch and there's a bunch of women, and I'm actually having brunch. I organized it for 9 of my girlfriends this Sunday, because it's like, when we're together, you empower yourself. You get to talk about things, and you get to grow, and you get to support and all that other stuff. And you walk away feeling good. I don't know many people that walk away, especially women, who walk away from a brunch feeling like, oh, that was crappy. You know what I mean? Most women are like, that was amazing. It's just like Sex and the City. It's like, you see it on those shows where it's like, come together, empower each other. Don't put each other down. I mean, that drives me nuts that women do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you introduce or choose to be introduced when you're on the stage, Amber, and all of that? I was just curious about that as we were heading out the door from this dinner party. So I asked the two ladies, so I'll ask you as well.
I'm Amber LeMay. That's all that needs to be said.
Amber LeMay, that's all that needs to be said. And all in that space where we're ready to get on out the door. I've got a veteran spot to get us all out and all along those lines. And this has been another amazing conversation. I'm going to have to find out and have all 3 of you, actually 4 counting Dr. Pitts, back on a future edition. I know that Stephanie has been on, I think, 2 or 3 times. I know that this was Dr. Pitts' second time. So I'll have to get you, Victoria, and Amber back on some future shows as well. But I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I've enjoyed having y'all. And definitely it was a fun and enjoyable time. I'm going to have to find out where that vodka is coming from so that we can grab some of it and share it the next time and all along those lines. So on that note, we're going to get on out of here, and we'll be back on next Wednesday with more exciting guests.
Thank you.
No problem.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, ladies.
How you holding up? Nothing wrong with getting help.
If I promise to look into it, will you drop it and help me build this fence?
Now you need my help.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.